Hi, Bruce. The threat of tariffs on Canadian goods spawned all kinds of support for all things Canadian, if you will. Have
hmm
you seen this shift in consumer sentiment? Have you seen this shift from retailers?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you check out social media, you'll see a pretty big movement going on right now, a buy Canadian movement. Very powerful. You'll see a lot from retailers too. I know folks like Loblaw sent out the CEO of Loblaw sent out a post on the weekend indicating they're going to make a conscious effort to try to source even more from Canada, more of their private label products, et cetera, from Canada. I think other retailers too. I've seen some pictures where retailers have put "Made in Canada" signs on the shelf to make it really easy for consumers to be able to at least find products that are made in Canada. So yeah, I think this is a pretty big movement. Will it slow down a bit with the pause in tariffs? Maybe not. We'll have to see.
Help us understand if you do want to support Canadian stuff, help us understand the labels then when it comes to made in Canada versus produced in Canada and the content of each.
Yeah, whenever you see "Made in Canada" on a label, it means that 51% or more of the cost of the content to build that product is in Canada. If it's product of Canada, that percentage goes up to 98%. So it's almost entirely the cost to make that product is almost entirely in Canada. And then there's other things you'll see like bottled in Canada, assembled in Canada, things of that nature that are sort of hybrids of that.
If we're seeing this movement on our side of the divide, do you expect to see the reverse then south of the border when it comes to Americans potentially boycotting Canadian brands, Canadian labels?
Yeah, I worry about that because, again, back to social media, there's some pretty fierce comments there from folks in America, sort of anti-Canadian comments. So I fear for folks like Lululemon or Canada Goose or other brands, that are known to be Canadian that are selling into America. They might see their sales slow down over time if these tariffs continue.
You had mentioned one of Canada's biggest grocery chains right at the start of this conversation. Let's talk about what's happening on the grocery side of things. Might be easier when it comes to bakery and meat for all things Canadian. Produce might be the balance might be a little more tilted towards the U.S. With respects to produce, especially at this time of the year. What do you think we can expect to see from retailers? You gave us a bit of a glimpse there earlier.
Yeah, I think to your point, unfortunately, a lot of the fruits and produce and vegetables is just not grown in Canada at this time for obvious reasons with the weather. A lot of that stuff is trucked up. Some of it, though, is trucked up from South America and Mexico. So I believe that's one of the things Loblaws is looking at is seeing if they can get some of that produce from South America or Mexico. And a lot of to your point, a lot of the bakeries and things like that are probably made locally, which is good. Some of the box stuff in the middle of the grocery aisle is kind of a hybrid. Some of it's made in Canada, some of it's made in the U.S. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge. But I know that I've heard of a lot of Canadians literally turning labels over in grocery stores, trying to determine what's made in Canada, what isn't, and buying accordingly.
Something that you and I haven't talked about yet, the possible impact of potential tariffs. If you're a Canadian company and you're bringing up goods from the US, what might that look like for consumers here?
100%. I mean, that's the big fear, right? I mean, the big fear in the US is that there's going to be a lot of inflation if these tariffs go through, when they go through. They've already went through for China, and China's countered. But when Canada puts countermeasures, counter tariffs in place, as the Prime Minister was mentioning the other day, certainly that's going to make imports more expensive. The other thing we're dealing with right now is a weakened Canadian dollar. And by definition, all imports where we buy in US dollars, which is pretty much most of them, is going to be more expensive, and we're going to have inflation just as a result of the weak dollar.
Lastly, as we wait to see what next steps look like, what can retailers be doing to prepare?
I think really they should be looking at their product assortments, looking at their sourcing strategies, determining if they can resource some of their products away from the US. into some of the other countries we mentioned. Maybe it's Mexico, maybe it's South America, maybe it's Latin America, maybe even Europe, depending on the item, to see if they can avoid, sort of being held hostage by these potential tariffs going forward. That's probably the best thing. And I think this whole thing is a wake up call, not just for retailers, but for Canadians to diversify our economy, build pipelines, sell our natural resources around the world. We don't want to ever be caught again with all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak.